Welcome, welcome. I'm Stephanie Jordan. I'm the local food program manager at Sustainable Solano. And I have also with me today, Allison Nagel. She is our communications manager, and she will be helping to manage all the back end stuff that you got to do with Zoom. So thank you, Allison. I really appreciate you today. And I'm happy to have all of you join. This is the quarterly meeting of the Solano Local Food System Alliance. And as you know, we are talking about land today, land use, planning, zoning, all of that good stuff. Before we dive in, I do want to pause and acknowledge and honor the many Indigenous people who have come before us on this land, who have inhabited and stewarded this land for generations. The unceded territory of California is home to nearly 200 tribal nations. And we're going to invite you to examine a map that Allison is going to put in the chat. It is a native lands map so that you can learn more about where you live, if perhaps you are joining us from outside of Solano, or even if you're in Solano, you can learn more. So next, I just want to give a brief background on the Solano Local Food System Alliance, or Alliance for short. So this group began in 2017 as an advisory group to Sustainable Solano. We had received a USDA Local Food Promotion Program grant, and we needed an advisory board. So a bunch of wonderful, passionate people stepped up and served on that advisory board. And at the time, we were investigating the feasibility of what we were calling community food centers. And the idea was that there would be a community food center in each of Solano County's 7 cities. It would have, a kitchen and an educational space, and maybe be a place for farmers to drop off their goods, community supported agriculture, that sort of thing. And at the conclusion of the grant, it became obvious and known that, it just wasn't the right time for these community food centers, but the advisory board had learned so much and grown together and really wanted to continue working together. And so we decided, let's keep you guys together, because we had a really great brain trust in that group. And so the group has now become this alliance, Solano Local Food System Alliance. And excuse me, Allison is also going to share just a link in the chat, which is the webpage that Sustainable Solano currently holds for the Alliance. They're not really a self-managing group yet, but I have confidence that someday they may be. So again, the group does gather quarterly, and it was decided a while ago that these quarterly meetings should be focused on an educational topic that the Alliance wanted to learn more about. So that's really what we're doing today. There is a smaller executive committee that meets monthly, and they're the ones that kind of help to plan these topics for the larger meetings, and do maybe a little more work on the ground, kind of boots on the ground from the Alliance. So the reason that we chose this topic today is in the last several Alliance meetings, questions have come up around planning, zoning, land use. We all know that access to farmland is at the foundation of the food system. And so we want to have, food production on different types of land plots. There have been questions that have come up around what gets built on certain types of land and entities purchasing land. It's kind of been all over the board. And so we really thought it was time to pull together some experts and educate us on all of these different aspects around land use and planning and zoning. So our kind of key question for the day is, how can planning and zoning support food production on various levels, those levels being rural and urban, which will in turn strengthen the foundation of the local food system. So that's what we're doing today. We have just a brief kind of boiled down agenda to share with you so that you can see what's coming up and what's going to happen. So I'm kind of going through the intro right now. We will then have a keynote speech by Dr. Catherine Brinkley, and I will introduce her further in a minute. We have Allan Calder with us today, who is a Solano County Planning Manager. We have Tracy Ellison of Solano Land Trust, and not yet joining us, but around 5 o'clock, Tyra Hays, who is a senior planner at the city of Vacaville, will be joining us. And then we will definitely open it up for questions from both the Alliance and the audience. We have been gathering questions in advance in preparation for this, so we do have a list of questions that have already come in, but all of you are welcome to pose questions to the group as well, and we hope that you will. And the procedure for that will be just please put them in the chat, and Allison will kind of field them and organize them and then send them over to me, and then we'll have kind of a Q&A and discussion toward the latter half of the meeting. So thank you, Allison, for sharing that. Let's see, and I think you all know we are recording this, so that little bit of housekeeping is out of the way. So again, the focus for today is really educational. We want to learn more about how the system works, which could lead to future discussions about improvement and also best practices. I know that sometimes planning can be a hot topic, but really today we just want to really understand more about who does what within these different areas of planning and zoning, and so that we can make informed decisions as we go forward. So, all right, I will now introduce Dr. Catherine Brinkley. She is our keynote speaker for today, and she is an associate professor in human ecology, community, and regional development at UC Davis, which is in the College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. She has a PhD in city and regional planning, and her research focuses on health and design. She is a former Fulbright Scholar, a Watson Fellow, and National Science Foundation Career Award winner. So she has also published topics on healthy food systems, local government planning and decision-making, and sustainable development. And when I read that, I thought, okay, this is the person we need at this meeting today. Her lab group currently works on two main research projects, the first being citizen engagement in local planning, and the second is mapping community food systems. So I'm going to leave it at that, and Dr. Brinkley, please take liberty to add on to that introduction. I know you'll be speaking more about the Center for Regional Change, which you are the director of. And so again, thank you so much for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here with you all today and to talk about food systems planning. I have a little PowerPoint to share to kind of guide us through the talk today. And I want to start by acknowledging that I co-direct the Center for Regional Change with Bernadette Austin. I'm the faculty director and she's the executive director. And we celebrated 15 years this year, which is really exciting. So we're going to talk about food systems planning today, and I want to reassure you that though I am an academic and I love research and I love planning, I also really enjoy the community building process that goes into food systems planning. So I've worked on a food and economic development plan in Davis, where I'm located, and this plan was really grassroots effort by communities. We convened a whole bunch of us to form a value statement around how we want to see food infused in our economic development, with everything from legalizing street food vending, which wasn't legal in Davis just yet, which is now across the board of the state legal, to community kitchens and farmland preservation. And then I've also worked with Santa Clara County on their food systems work plan. And this is really about connecting working lands with industry and restaurants. And then just last year, working with Valley Vision and the Sacramento Region Community Foundation on a multi-county food system action plan, which builds on everything from workforce employment to how various cities and counties are addressing food system. And really the latter two plans were very focused on COVID and the dislocation we all felt when grocery store aisles suddenly were empty of products we normally buy. And there was this rapid shift in thinking about, when will we face food shortages and what will they be, and how can we support each other through these crises, particularly folks who are living on the margins. So all of this effort is in partnership with a variety of community groups, including the Community Alliance for Family Farmers, the Edible Schoolyard Project, UC Ag and Natural Resources is an excellent resource with extension, and then the California Alliance of Farmers Markets. So with that, a little bit of background in engaged food system planning. Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the center I direct on campus, so you know that that's a resource there for you all. And then we'll dive into how are California cities and counties planning for their food systems. And I will showcase a tool that we built that allows you to search across all California plans to pull up terms that you might be interested in, whether it's urban gardens or food security or food banks. So to start, the Center for Regional Change existed before I was onboarded at UC Davis under the former director, Jonathan London, and throughout its 15 years, it's really focused on collaborative research. So this is different from a lot of research centers which have a scientific research agenda. We do research that's very practically focused with community partners always. So there's always this applied piece to the work that we do, and we always center social justice in the work that we do. We work on a variety of topics from housing to public health in that work. So here's some examples of the reports we've worked on. We've looked at planning for water quality in the Central Valley. We've worked on housing developments, for example, Aggie Square, but we've also built a database of inclusive housing ordinances that can be consulted for groups who are thinking about including those in their own cities. And we're also working on environmental justice in the transportation sector, convening community groups there. Another piece that we work on is economic development, and this is an ongoing project. So we have launched with Yolo County a really innovative basic income program, which lifts every family who's experiencing homelessness with a child under the age of 5 above the California poverty threshold for 2 years. And we're evaluating the impacts of that on childhood health and wellness to see how it impacts caregivers being able to spend more time with their kids, get them to doctor's appointments, learning, mental health. So we're really excited about that project. And again, it's county level. So there's potential to grow it to other counties. Another big piece of the work that the Center for Regional Change does is a focus on youth. And this is particularly important in rural counties and agricultural places that have a whole lot of youth. So we do a lot of youth engagement in high schools and middle schools and elementary schools, empowering the youth to give voice to what they want to see happen. And that's what's so beautiful about planning is it's not like voting, just a reminder to vote. You don't have to be 18 yet. Anyone can show up and participate in the planning process, which is wonderful. So we have a whole curriculum for how to engage youth in planning and also advocating for the change they want to see, and over a decade of work on that, largely led by Nancy Erbstein. We also have engaged student researchers. So I saw a name in the chat that I thought might have been a former student, but I'm not quite sure. So reach out if you are. But this is a program which I'm really thrilled to support. We have students who we place with our community partners. So if you're looking for qualified, engaged, bright interns, this is a project where we encourage community members to partner with us and report back. It's a great way of maintaining relationships long term. All right, now on to the planning. So this is what the interface looks like for the general plan mapping tool that we've built. And right now we have a really exciting project with California Air Resources Board, where we are updating this database so that it will have all city and county plans available and you can search across it. And with Cal Air Resources Board, we're working on plan evaluations in 3 particular areas. So looking at how cities and counties are planning for zero emission vehicles, who's doing it, how are they doing it, what are their funding sources, what is their timeline, will we achieve state targets? We're also looking at how cities and counties are planning to reduce vehicle miles traveled, so more focusing on walking, biking, livable neighborhoods. And then the last part is decarbonization in the built environment. So how are cities and counties transitioning their energy use? And this is all possible because we have this database of city and county plans. So now we can more rapidly search across them for comparison. So just a little bit of background. You might already know this, but if you don't, then this will be a little bit of repetition. General plans in California are required to address 9 elements. It used to be 8. So land use, which includes zoning, circulation, which is transportation, housing, and there you'll need to address the regional housing needs. So making sure that you're feasibly building enough housing and affordable housing. There's an element or a chapter on open space, so preservation, which is sometimes combined with the element on conservation. There's a standard noise element, safety, which tends to be hazards, and more could be done in safety elements because a lot of them are from the 80s. And then in the Central Valley in particular, air quality is a required element. And then very recently, the state added a requirement that cities and counties address environmental justice. And part of the reason that they added this requirement is because so many cities and counties were already addressing environmental justice. So there was already this momentum that was built up. And so advocates were able to say, we're already doing it across many places. It's working really well. Let's reflect that back down again. But for some communities that haven't yet thought of environmental justice, it can be this can be a lot to wrap their minds around. How do we do this? What does this mean? So I'll talk a little bit about that today when we talk about planning and plan updates. If I were to boil, there's planners in the room here, so I'm going to grossly overstate this. If I were to boil the planning process down and grossly oversimplify it, I would say there's 3 major steps. So first is using your ABCD, as we like to call it, asset-based community development. So you start by getting a group together and saying, what are the strengths of our community? And it sounds like your group has already said, our strengths are our beautiful ag land and our rich history in it. And then you center those strengths and you build on them. And there are a whole bunch of wonderful, very interactive ways to do this. Where instead of having conversations that can devolve into there's not enough parking and we're going to focus on parking spots, you center the pieces that you like about your community and that you want to build on. And then the second part is to identify your values and your community identity. So what do you stand for and how do you make that the central feature of your plan? And then the third part is where you get to the needs. So what are the pieces that need to change and doing a needs assessment? And then of course you also have to comply with state regulations. So Environmental Quality Act and the regional housing needs allocations. And I will also say for those who are thinking about updating their plans, the plan is the vehicle by which state and federal goals get realized. It's where the rubber hits the road. And it's also the place that local communities.
Page 19 of the general plan.
Sorry? It's also the place that the local communities get to rebuild themselves in the way that they want to be. So a strong plan will commit staff. So it will say which staff or which department are responsible. It will identify which funding sources it's going to go after. So if you're putting in a new Safe Routes to School program, you would want to say, we're going to go search for dollars, with the federal Safe Routes to School program, for example. It will also commit timelines. So by, 5 years from now, we will have built a green belt that is 10 kilometers longer. So you will also have metrics for success. With those pieces, you can create a strong policy that you can, once it's in the plan, hold electeds' promises to it, because city council turns over, planning staff turns over, but the plan is meant to guide the community for the next 10, 15, sometimes 20 years. So those are the plan pieces. Now, suppose you all are getting together and you want to update your plan and you really want to have an innovative policy around food security. One of the problems up until now is that not all plans are in the same place. So it's not like Google. You can't just log on and say, I'd like a recipe for food security. What do I do? The way that you could with pumpkin pie. Not all plans are available on web pages, and they're not all in the same format. So readable PDFs, and oftentimes there's not standard metadata, so there's not usually an adoption date. It can be very confusing to read a plan. Friends who are lawyers say that reading a plan is worse than reading legal code, which really says something. So it's a daunting task for folks who don't have a PhD to approach the plan, and it shouldn't be that way. We should get better at drafting plans that are easier to find, to read, and to compare, which is the research that I'm trying to build toward. So what we did is we built a search engine for plans, and we have all of the plans available as PDFs, the city and the counties. We're missing 6 city plans, which are not electronically available. So we're still working on those. And the idea for this search engine is that right now, if the state wants to know how cities or counties are planning for something, they send what's called an annual planning survey, and they ask planners who are already kind of stretched then, does your city plan for climate adaptation? And they get a 60 to 70% response rate. So it's hard to get a good grip on what exactly is happening in California because of that. On the advocate side, if you're really pushing for sustainable food systems, it can be really hard to know which cities or counties are planning to move in that direction and which are not. And for local jurisdictions as well, it can sometimes be very empowering for cities to know that the cities nearby or the counties nearby have already piloted a proposal to success. Or they can also feel very excited about being the first, and they can know that they are the first to put in an innovative policy. And then last, for folks like me in the research world, having a treasure trove of data is really lovely. So for all of those reasons, we built this search tool. So the way that it works is you enter the search term here, and you can enter a single term or a composite term like environmental justice. And just to define that term, environmental justice aims to reduce compounded health risks to disadvantaged communities, which are defined through CalEnviroScreen, which is a search tool that the Center for Regional Change helped build in partnership with the state. And the goal of environmental justice is not only to reduce the pollution burden on those communities, but also to promote their engagement in the decision-making process. And in California, this effort is tied to public dollars. So here's CalEnviroScreen, and you can see Solano here, and the darker colors indicate the pollution burden. So you can see which areas might qualify for cap and trade funding for development projects, which is a powerful financial mechanism for realizing might be a powerful financial mechanism for realizing some of your goals. So you're interested in how can we do environmental justice? How are other communities doing it? You enter the search term and you can pull up cities and counties that have addressed this term. And this is from an earlier version of the database, but you can see only 31 out of the then 461 cities use the term environmental justice. 13 out of the 58 counties. So that's not bad. There's a long way to go, but that's progress. And then you can see what year the plan was created. So obviously plans that were done earlier are going to be maybe not as developed in some of the ideas or tactics that they're taking. In building this search tool, we worked with the California Environmental Justice Alliance, which is a group of 10 nonprofits. And so one of the pieces that they brought to our attention is that when they provide technical assistance for planning for environmental justice, it's really helpful to compare cities that are of similar sizes or that are in similar counties. So we added these two features as well so that you can compare to similar areas, because it might not work to say, well, Los Angeles did it, is not always a great selling point in some cities. And others it is. And then you can click on the year and you'll pull up a PDF of the plan, and you can search for your term within the plan and read the policy in its context, which can be really helpful because plans often include images and they include maps. So it's not just text, but that allows you to pull out some details. So that is if you're searching on your own, you're conducting your own sort of crude plan evaluation assessment. We're also providing targeted plan evaluation assessments. So we did this for environmental justice, and we looked at 7 plans, and we pulled out all of the policies within those 7 plans that had the most mention of environmental justice. And it turns out there were 628 policies that addressed development for a disadvantaged community. And we were able to create this database of environmental justice policies. So there's a smorgasbord of policies that you could look through, think about, say, would this fit for our community? Yes, no. Or, you know, provide more targeted feedback. And then the other thing that we realized when we did this is that there was a greater focus on environmental justice in communities that were more majority of color. So this speaks to some of the effort that cities and counties that are not majority of color may have to put in order to realize environmental justice. There will need to be an active effort to bring folks to the table and empower them to create policies. And I'm happy to share that paper, which should be out in a couple of weeks, as well as the database. So some of the policies that were included were Coachella has a policy that focuses on pesticide exposure for farm workers, as well as farm worker housing. So you could look up farm worker housing if that was an area of creating a sustainable food system that your community wanted to pursue. Another targeted evaluation that we're doing is focused specifically on food systems, and we compared mention of food, agriculture, and nutrition with the mention of water. And surprise, surprise, in California, water is mentioned in all plans, which is wonderful, as it should be. And food and agriculture are in the majority of plans. Nutrition is in nearly half of plans, which is great, but it also shows that there's a lot of room for improvement. And then when we look at sort of the strength of policies, so does the policy include a timeline? Does it commit staff? Does it have metrics of success? Has it identified funding? You can see that there are more strong policies in agriculture than there are in food systems. So there are stronger policies for farmland protection or preservation or creating urban growth boundaries than, say, there are for regulating the density of fast food chains or programs to support urban gardens. And then there are even fewer when it comes to nutrition policies, which would be policies like sugar sweetened beverages, taxation, or ordinances about fast food companies offering soft drinks with Happy Meals, for example, is another ordinance that is in many cities. So this is that, again, in color, showing that while water exists across many plans, agriculture, food, and nutrition are there's still more work to be done in terms of planning. And then the last bit is that most implementation actions don't have an identified funding. So a lot of planning language in general is pretty soft. And I think part of that is because it takes communities quite a lot just to get to that. What are our strengths? What are we proud of? Who are we? And where do we want to go? And then to get to that extra step of here's how fast we want to get there. And here's what we're willing to do. Sometimes can take even more. So these conversations about updating city plans can take years, quite honestly, on average, a couple of years. So some of the plans with the strongest policies around food and water tend to be very large cities that have really thought through water quality and how they want their food environment to be shaped. Unsurprisingly, a lot of the cities that score very highly in having strong agricultural policies are surrounded by farmland. So you end up with those policies around purchasing development rights to preserve farmland, green belts that allow walking and biking through farmland for greater appreciation of farmland. And then the plan that scored the best for nutrition, with a focus on childhood nutrition, diabetes, obesity, is a small city, Baldwin Park. So we're able to do these more sort of targeted, broad plan evaluations. But I think the search tool also will enable community groups to pull out specific examples. So, for example, and some of the food equity policies have ordinances that limit big box stores in downtown areas in order to protect smaller businesses, or ordinances that limit fast food operations. Cities will also have streamlined street food vending, permitting, and inspection reports, particularly for fruit and vegetable vendors. And these enable smaller businesses to thrive downtown, which has economic spillover benefits in addition to the food policy. And then the land management examples for agriculture include programs with mapping urban gardens, looking at vacant lots, and creating programs that allow vacant lots to be turned over into urban gardens with water supply often. Urban growth boundaries, such as that the city of Davis has, and as I mentioned before, purchasing farmland development rights to ensure that farmland is not developed on. These can also include leasing farmland development rights. And then just in a last example, we've looked also at climate adaptation, because the state pins a lot of hopes and dreams on cities and counties changing their built environment in order to meet climate mitigation and adaptation promises, goals, really. And when we looked at just the mention of this term, climate adaptation, across plans, only about 6% of cities mention the word climate adaptation. One mentions managed retreat. So I don't want to alarm anybody, but becomes slightly alarming when cities and counties are not planning, when it takes so long to plan. And I think a lot of collaborative effort is aimed at meeting that need and realizing that we need to meet it rather quickly. And we have invested interest in making these changes right where we live. So I'm very hopeful that cities and counties will start working quickly. And we need to work quickly. This is a map that shows the date of general plan adoption. And you can see that some general plans that are in operation right now have been in place since the 70s or before. And the bubble map on the right has cities by size, spatially, and then when I push them in so they're not overlapped on each other, California looks like a weird peanut, but that allows you to see all the cities not overlapping with one another. But the point of this is that a lot of general plans are going to be updated in the coming years across California. So there's a real chance to learn with each other as many other cities and counties are learning. And one of the efforts that we're doing through that California Air Resources Board partnership is with those targeted plan evaluations around zero emission vehicles, reducing vehicle miles traveled, and decarbonizing the built environment. We will start hosting workshops across California to work with local governments, regional governments, and community-based organizations, providing them these sorts of targeted plan evaluations so that they can update their plans in accordance with state expectations, the latest research, and feasibility with what other cities and counties are doing. Because it's one thing for the state to say we should do this. It's another thing for the research community to say, here's what you could do. And it's a third thing to say, here's what cities and counties have been able to do. This is what's feasible. And oftentimes there's some discrepancy between those three, which is interesting for a researcher, but for the practical minded, it's really helpful to know what your neighbors are doing and to sort of keep up with the Joneses in that sense. So with that, I will end, and thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dr. Brinkley. That was a lot of information.
I know.
But good information. Before we move on to Mr. Calder, I just want to check in with any of the Alliance members and see if anybody had a quick comment or need a clarifying question for Dr. Brinkley. I don't know. I'm going to see if Allison can help scan the people. You can raise your hand, or some of you might be able to unmute. Maybe not. Or you can drop something in the chat too.
There's a raised hand, so
Okay.
let me see if we can do the unmute here.
Thank you. I had some technical difficulties in the beginning, so I couldn't really hear some of it. Are we able to access that dashboard, or is that like an internal thing?
No, that's a great question. Unfortunately, we are migrating servers right now, so the tool is down this week, but it should be up soon, and I can drop a link in the chat so that
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Check back. Yeah.
No other raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the next person I would like to introduce is Allan Calder, who is a Solano County Planning Manager. And Mr. Calder, I would like you to just kind of give us an overview of, what areas of the county fall under the county planning part. I think we need a little bit of like the job description from your end.
Right. Sure enough.
Yeah, I think we want to be clear on, where does county planning intersect with some of the local farms and food system activities, and where does it not? So.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Well, I got to say there's big shoes to fill here following Dr. Brinkley. I'll try my best. So thank you for that presentation. I thought that was terrific and very informative as well. And it really does cross over on a number of our areas that we're dealing with here in the county as well. So it's very timely for this discussion as well. Let's see. So maybe I'll just start with a little bit of background on myself. Also, just kind of introduce the my history here at the county. I've just been here just over 2 years now with Solano County, acting as a planning manager. June will have been 2 years, so I'm just over 2 years, but really excited to be here at the county and talk with you all today. So I appreciate the invite. I have a background in landscape architecture. Actually, went to school out in Colorado and actually migrated towards planning early in my career. When I was working in Colorado, and we were doing a lot of out in Colorado called general plan updates. Here in well, I'm sorry, and there it's comprehensive plans, and these are general plans, obviously in California. And so it's very similar. And so I actually went through and got a certificate through the license through the American Planning Association and the American Institute of Certified Planners. And as such, it's a really great organization because it kind of brings forth best management practices in the planning industry. First job out of school was actually with the San Francisco League of Urban Gardeners. You might know it as SLUG, where we designed and built community gardens and parks with at-risk youth and ex-convicts. And we counseled them through the process. It was very, very interesting program. And I was there for a couple of years with SLUG. And so I've got a background in kind of that world, and also working for large international companies where I spent in recent years 3.5 years in West Africa, directly working for the government. We were the de facto Department of Public Works for the country. It's a country, the state of about the size of Colorado, Gabon, and I was based in the capital city of Libreville. Very interesting opportunity there. We had over 100 projects that we were working on in the county or in the country, mostly infrastructure related projects, but we did launch a very interesting international design competition for about 10 miles of waterfront development. It was a very interesting effort an important one for the country. So that said, I also got a bit of a stint with Siskiyou County up in the as a community development director, and then also working as a contract planner for a number of years before showing up here in Solano County. So as an interesting aspect of that, I did familiarize myself with a number of the county issues and things that are very pertinent here that go on. And obviously there's a long history of ag preservation in the county. Obviously the Solano County Orderly Growth Committee has been doing a great job of protecting the Solano County farmland and open space since '84. They've really done some very interesting opportunities with regards to directing kind of development, if you will, towards the municipalities in the county. So as you know, there's city jurisdictions, and then there's the county. So we basically here in Solano County deal with everything that's not a city in the county. And so we're the unincorporated areas of the county is what we have purview over. Each city has its own planning efforts, general plans, zoning, et cetera. And that governs the city's growth direction. And then we have our own version as well. And when these overlap, they're municipal service areas where services can be provided by the city to county properties. And they're also known as spheres of influence. So our plans where they overlap, those are spheres of influence of each jurisdiction. And so it's really kind of an interesting opportunity to collaborate. And we do quite frequently with each jurisdiction. So it's a really neat. And then we also very frequently meet as a group with the planning directors in the county, and that includes the Solano Transportation Authority, which has a big housing focus these days. And so they're always involved and usually spearheading those meetings amongst the directors. And so it's a really great opportunity to hear what's going on a timely basis in each city and municipality and organization. So there's a high level of coordination amongst different groups in Solano County, which is terrific. And it's been very helpful for us all to do that. For instance, we're We're updating our housing elements now. The RENA numbers were addressed in the prior presentation. And those are the required housing units that each city and municipality needs to generate in order to meet, future growth needs. And we're doing that collectively together. We have one consultant that's doing the cities, all the cities and the county's housing element updates. So we collaborate quite frequently, and it's not only beneficial, but it's necessary. You just really can't design community or experience growth in a community or an organization without knowing what your neighbor's doing. And so I think, do that pretty effectively here in Solano County. Not all counties do that by any means, but I think that's unique to Solano County. It says a lot about the kind of cooperative spirit that's here. So that's been really positive so far for us. But we, in general, here in the planning division, look at lands and planning entitlements that have to do with just the unincorporated areas of Solano County.
Thank you so much for that overview. All right, and next I would like to invite Tracy Ellison of Solano Land Trust. I think I saw that Nicole was on here too. So I think Tracy, I think you're the one who's up. So please, if you could just speak briefly on, what the Land Trust does specifically. I know you work with agricultural easements, which would kind of probably tie in more with Allan Calder's areas, I'm guessing. Excuse me. And just give us some background on that, and again, what you have the scope to do within the Land Trust and what you don't. That'd be great.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. Good evening, everyone. I am Tracy Ellison, Conservation Director at Solano Land Trust. I've been at the Land Trust now for 11 years, working specifically with the programs to do conservation agreements on agricultural land with partners, with our landowners that are farming and producing food and fiber in Solano County. Solano Land Trust is a 501c3 nonprofit that is recognized to have the ability to hold and steward what is called a conservation easement agreement. These are agreements with private landowners that are making a choice to utilize a conservation agreement as a tool in their farm operation or their land ownership. Conservation easement, conservation agreement really is a voluntary agreement between a landowner and a land trust or an agency that has the ability to hold a conservation easement agreement. This is typically the purchase of development rights that Dr. Brinkley spoke about in order to preserve and conserve land for either current production or the future of agricultural production. Every landowner has a choice to utilize this tool. And what it does is it protects and conserves that land through a deed of conservation that is placed on title. Typically in Solano County and across the nation, there's lots of ways that easements are placed. Ours are typically purchased easements. Landowners are choosing to take the opportunity to sell a right that they own as a landowner, and developing a property is a right. We speak lots about landowners having a bundle of sticks, very similar to their water right, their mineral right, their ability to develop, subdivide, put houses on, or farm choices. And so what a conservation agreement does is it's a negotiated voluntary agreement where we talk about what do they want to restrict their property, what that value may be, and negotiate those terms in place in an agreement, again, that goes against the title. We work with a lot of state and federal programs that are doing this exact same support. They've got buckets of money at both through the Farm Bill or through the governor's budget that allow land trusts to apply for grants to support these landowner choices. These are permanently protected. Again, we're restricting or limiting the use with the idea that agricultural uses are the primary purpose. Those values are what are being protected, again, for current and future agricultural production. Landowners retain the property ownership. The land trust, through a conservation agreement, does not own the land. And that further farm choices or agricultural choices are typically not restricted in a traditional ag agreement. So they're choosing crop types, they're managing their irrigation, they can enter sustainable climate management plans, things that are supportive of those agricultural values. They still have all of those rights retained. This is a partnership between the land trust and the landowner. Because we hold that conservation agreement in public trust, we are asked to monitor the terms of that agreement every year. So we're in constant communication with landowners, building those relationships, and then going out and monitoring the property against the terms of the agreement. Again, good communication builds great partnerships, and that is what we're talking about doing. The partnership is with the land trust, not necessarily with the funder. But these are negotiated agreements. They aren't cookie cutters, is one size fits all. So landowners do have the opportunity to negotiate with the land trust and the funders as to what those restrictions are. But again, these are purchased easements, so there is a value related to what those restrictions are. And this is binding on all future landowners. So again, when we preserve these properties, we extinguish those development rights. They aren't transferred in this case. They aren't utilized later. We are truly, through the conservation easement agreement, protecting the agricultural uses by extinguishing those development rights. This is a one-time purchase. The original landowner that chooses to enter this agreement within the market receives a payment. And usually these folks are doing succession planning. They're thinking about taking this money and purchasing more land to further their ag business, maybe improve their property with irrigation, or move to orchards, or buy more tractors, or they're looking to improve by utilizing their own land, which they plan to farm themselves. But if sold, this sells then at agricultural values, and it's always a great way to continue agriculture, maybe get new farmers, beginner farmers, those that are entering the program onto land that typically is expensive. Ag is the highest and best use in this current market, and we're seeing a lot of climate issues, obviously water issues, and I think ag has to address that. And so this is an opportunity for new landowners or new farmers to get on when the value has come down because those development rights have been extinguished. So I work all 11 years with our local landowners. Solano Land Trust currently holds 32 conservation easements in Solano County. Very excited about that. We've had a big run of conservation easements over the last 6 or so years. The Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program, SULC, which is administered through the Department of Conservation. Those monies are cap and trade monies. That's a big program with the state of California that we're utilizing right now. And the Strategic Growth Council, has those monies, has them go down to the Department of Conservation. They're really about supporting agricultural land and supporting cities with infill type development. Again, Dr. Brinkley mentioned many words that we use in the work that I do. So we're trying to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and the vehicle miles traveled through those programs while keeping sustainable farmland protected. Solano County, or Solano Land Trust, with its board, community separators are a big deal for us. We want to continue to see this wonderful Solano County with space between our cities. I think it's part of the quality of life that we see, why people may move here. But not only do we have open land, but we have all of this open land that is both farmed and or recreated. So we're always excited to talk about not only our conservation easement work that we do with private landowners, but also the land trust and its ability to have land and be a fee title owner, with the opportunity for Solano County residents to hike and bike and horseback ride and really get out in nature. So we are doing really 2 big programs here in Solano County. But working privately with those landowners, I think, really feeds into the topic today about how are we working towards being a good partner with our cities, with our county, with other agencies that are like-minded, ultimately to preserve the agricultural culture and economy here in Solano County. I'm really excited. I don't know if anybody saw the article. USDA is a $23 million grant to support schools buying food from local districts and local farmers. So really excited to see that. And I'm sure we watch for grants too. We're, as a nonprofit, we're consistently trying to find ways to support. And there's a new grant that I'm starting to read through, which is an urban garden grant through the USDA. And so if there's a chance for us to, partner and do that type of work, we'd love to see that happen too. But again, Solano Land Trust, our phones are available, emails, anybody's welcome to give us a call and learn more about what we do. But very excited to be part of a partnership and in our community. We did a great program through the COVID period called the Farm to Community Food Connection Program, where we got our ag donors and our board and the Solano Community Foundation. We were able to raise quite a bit of money where we could go back out as a land trust and purchase animals at the local fairs, buy produce that was in the ground from farmers that didn't have an opportunity because restaurants had closed or farmers markets were closed. And we found an opportunity for us to go out and buy produce, keep those farmers moving forward, and then donate back to our local nonprofits, specifically the food bank. But we also got protein and produce out to many nonprofits during that period. So we're very proud of that project.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. There's something that came up from Dr. Brinkley here. A resource we are building. I don't know if you want to read that. National Zoning Atlas.
Oh, just in addition to the zoning database, we're also partnering nationally and on a California zoning atlas. So the zoning and the plan go together hand in hand.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. We have Tyra Hays just joined, Senior Planner at City of Vacaville. Hello, welcome.
Hi there. Sorry I'm a little late.
But that's okay. We had a presentation by Dr. Brinkley at UC Davis, kind of gave us the big overview of planning and some specific tools that can be used to kind of cross compare plans from different cities. And then Allan Calder gave us a little overview of what the county is more or less in charge of when it comes to that intersection of planning and food. And then you just heard a little bit from Tracy Ellison of Solano Land Trust. And so sorry to kind of throw you on the spot here, but it's your turn. So if you could maybe give us a little bit of an overview of how the city planning efforts differ from that at the county level. And also, when Dr. Brinkley was speaking, I didn't realize this, but there are these 9 areas that plans are required to include. And I was trying to understand where food production fits, because it wasn't really obvious. So if there are some areas that you could address in terms of where that intersection happens, that would be great. So, and thank you for joining us and giving your time to this meeting.
Oh, not a problem. This is actually very timely for me because I was just talking about food programs about an hour ago. So, okay, so hello everyone. My name is Tyra. I've been with the city of Vacaville now for way longer than I really want to admit. I don't know what Allan has shared with you, but as you can imagine, incorporated cities are quite different than that of counties. Incorporated cities really focus on development. So majority of what we deal with is the development of housing, commercial uses, industrial uses, things of that nature. However, we are required to play nicely with the county because wherever there's a city limit boundary, on the other side of that boundary is the county. So because of that, and I'll talk about more about this in a moment, but our general plan, which is essentially the blueprint for the city, requires us to create a buffer that keeps sensitive land uses away from the agricultural areas. Now, this buffer isn't only to protect the sensitive uses, such as, whether it be a school or homes, it's also to help protect the agriculture. The reason for that is when you've got people doing flyovers, spraying the fields, I'm sure you're all aware, the people living on the urban side of that line are going to get a little concerned and they start complaining. And more restrictions get placed on that farmer. Well, we don't want to see that happen. So we want to make sure we keep a little play area in between the two uses so that they can coexist. So in terms of those 9 little things that all cities have to have, that all references what we call our general plan. Every city, every county in the state of California has to have what they call a general plan. Other states have their own version of a general plan, but it's called a comprehensive plan. What it is a big list of goals, policies, and actions the city must comply with in order to not only comply with whether it be federal law or state law, but also those laws that they've created for themselves. So as I mentioned earlier, we require that we have an agricultural buffer between sensitive land uses on the urban side of our city limit line and that of agriculture. So I believe our new city limit, our new ag buffer is, I think, 300 feet wide. We had updated our general plan back in 2015. And at that time, we had a wider buffer, and I believe it was 500 feet in width. Since then, we had worked with the county, and it was determined that a 300-foot buffer was adequate. So we have a smaller buffer, but we're trying to make sure that we respect that as much as we possibly can, because we want, again, those two uses to coexist. In our case, we've been placing passive recreation in those areas, mainly just pathways and a little bit of landscaping, nothing more. So there'll never be development in that area. It can't happen. The city owns it. It's just passive recreation. So let's see. You had asked, okay, let me back up. Those general plans. We don't necessarily have to have 9 components. We call them elements. That's just another word for chapters. But we do have to comply with specified sections within our general plan. The biggest one as a planner that I deal with is called the land use element. As you can imagine, with a term like land use element, what that means is we include all the goals, policies, and actions that pertain to all types of development, including agriculture, if we have it within our city limits. And in our case, we have hillside agriculture, because of course we're against the hills. The other mandatory elements or chapters, if you will, contend with things such as transportation. Let's see here, safety, that's a very big one. Safety, noise, transportation, public facilities. Public facilities really just references water and sewer. And I'm sure I'm forgetting 1 or 2 of the others. I should know this, but so there's a lot of things that we have to be consistent with in terms of state law. There's just some things we cannot do or we are required to do. But a lot of the things we choose to put in there are adopted at the local level. The city of Vacaville is currently doing a technical update to their general plan. Like all the cities and the county in Solano County itself, we are updating what we call our housing elements. So we are required to prepare, the opportunity for a certain number of housing units within the next 8 years. But this year, given that we've had all these fires, the state is coming in saying you also have to concurrently update your safety element to make sure that you keep those new homes safe. You don't put homes in tinder boxes, not a good idea. So we're working on that as well. But what I'm kind of more excited about, and we're learning it ourselves as we go on, is we are adopting what's called environmental justice goals, actions, and policies. That's where we start talking about food production and providing healthy food options for residents who live within city limits and may have limited access, in terms of not having a car. So while Other jurisdictions can choose where they want to address, whether it be agriculture or healthy food choices. For us, it made most sense to address that in our land use element because, of course, agriculture and what happens on the land is a land use. So just today, we were talking amongst ourselves because these new policies that we are proposing are brand new. We've never done it before. And while they're all, I mean, no disrespect, they're all feel-good policies, we as local jurisdictions are limited in terms of what we can do. Contrary to what some people might think, we can't go out to a store owner and say, you will sell fresh apples and bananas, and you will buy that, those fruits from a local farmer. We can't do that, and you wouldn't want us to do that. However, if we worked with perhaps a third party who already does that, and we can help incentivize them somehow, that's something we would be interested in doing. It's our understanding that there are a ton of grants out there, grants that provide everything from, handing out food to, people in need, maybe they're in disadvantaged communities. There's grants out there for the creation of community gardens. Community gardens is something the city of Vacaville has been very interested in the last 7 years, but to this date, the one thing that has stopped us is the grant does not cover ongoing maintenance. We don't know how to maintain the gardens. I just found out today that the city of Sacramento has a full-time community gardens manager. I don't know how they're funded, and that's something that I'm proposing to follow up on just so we have a better understanding. But what we're really looking forward to doing in the near term is who can we partner with? So I heard someone else, I think it was maybe Tracy, saying they're interested in partnering. So are we. There's a lot of things we don't know, but we want to learn. And if there's an opportunity that we bring our resources together, we would be interested in pursuing that idea. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else we're trying to do. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to embarrass her, but that's okay. Robin has been amazing in terms of supporting the city of Vacaville with our environmental justice goals, policies, and actions. And some of the things that have made it into our administrative draft general plan are some of the things that she had recommended, such as finding a way that we can help encourage, for lack of a better word, convenience markets to provide healthy food options in addition to processed foods. Mm-hmm. Is there a way that we maybe can think a little bit outside the box and provide better access, whether it be through pedestrian connections, bicycle connections, or even, expanding our transit stops to get people closer to these stores that provide those healthy food options. So that's kind of where we are right now. The public draft of this document is going to be out in March, and that's going to be something that we're going to be sharing with the public, of course. We will also be presenting it to our planning commission and city council. If there's anyone on this call who wants to see it and might want to add some information to it, I definitely encourage you to do so. In fact, I'll even put my direct email and phone number in the chat. So I'm not going to pretend I know all the answers, but I'm very excited at the opportunity that we're doing this. And I'm going to give a little kudos to the city of Vacaville. I'm not going to go into all the details. We are not legally required to adopt the EJ goals, policies, and actions at this time. There's certain criteria you have to meet in order to be mandated to do it. We thought it best that let's get ahead of this before it becomes a problem. Or let me rephrase that. Let's get ahead of it before it becomes a bigger, more measurable problem. So right now, we kind of have the latitude to kind of play with things and see what works. So do you guys have any other questions for me, or maybe some insight?
Oh, there are many questions, and you started to touch on one which came in from a community member. So I'm going to kind of kick off the whole Q&A section right now. And I would actually, I don't know if this applies to all four of you, but I would love to hear feedback from all four of you. So this person has asked, what would go into supporting a public farm that is farmed by city or county employees, like a park ranger, but in this case, a farmer? And what would be the process to have something like this considered? So who would like to take that on?
Well, I want to make sure I understood the question first. So I understood it to mean, what would it take to have a public farm? Now, was it worked by city employees?
They're saying what would go into supporting a public farm that is farmed by city or county employees. And in parentheses, they said like a park ranger, but in this case, a farm. What would be the process to have something like this considered?
Ooh, that's a great question. That's really
We're kind of a
outside the
step
box.
up from a community garden here. I think this is public farm. So yeah, what do you
Well,
think of that?
first and foremost, we would have to have the land available to even consider that. So preferably someone would already, someone who's proposing this would either have the land themselves, or perhaps they know someone who'd be willing to, I'm going to guess, donate the land. But really what would have to happen is they would have to speak with our city council. Essentially, they would have to, I would recommend that they lobby the city council members, maybe individually first, just talk to them, share their ideas, maybe try to get that city council person excited about the possibility of this. And ultimately, they would have to come before the city council, and they can do this from business from the floor if they just want to speak openly, or if they want to agendize it, come to the city council and propose it, see what they have to say. But ultimately, in order for anyone here, oh, interesting, if in order for the city of Vacaville to do anything like that, we would have to be directed by our city council.
Okay. Olivia, Tracy has, go ahead, Tracy.
I love the question, and I think individually, whether it be the city, I think a feasibility study and partnerships is kind of where we have to start. I know that for Solano Land Trust and a plan that we have, we have the idea that we as a land trust would like to explore the potential, but we'd have to do it with partners. And one of those partners being the Center for Land-Based Learning, who is, they're growing farmers, they're teaching farmers, folks either with the background or without, that are going to be the future of those that are growing food. We also have the Veteran Farmers Program, I believe still out of Davis, that could be an opportunity. But I think it does in this day and age kind of take a partnership. But the idea that land would be available, the idea that we could have farmers that are interested in leasing maybe a portion of that land, these new farmers, beginner farmers. I'd love to see advisors and mentors be brought into this that are supporting this process all the way through, who the recipients are. I think they should be engaged so that they know where their food is coming from. So again, the Land Trust has been really good at convening or networking folks together. Robin, I think you've been part of a lot that's going on possibly. It's not my realm, but I'm sure that we brought lots of community interests together, and this might be another opportunity. I mentioned that grant earlier, and I agree with Tyra. Ideas are great and they love to give you money to get started, but it's how do you maintain it long term? And a lot of projects run into that. So I think that's putting heads together. And I'd love to see, the donated land, the council saying yes, the school saying we want to receive this, or the community mentorships. But it's the roundtable first, I think.
Yeah. There was a related question to you, Tracy, about is it possible to farm some of the open space land currently held in the land trust if the land is feasible, has the right soil, has the right water, that sort of thing?
It absolutely would be. I think most of the land that we own has rangeland, and that is currently farmed. Livestock is grazed on those properties. Certainly water is an issue, and typically the water goes towards livestock and or maybe the restoration habitat that we have going on for much of the natural resources that are on our properties. I don't think we have a situation right now where that could happen. And again, so much public access, but it doesn't mean we haven't thought about it. It's such an educational opportunity when we do have the public out to our lands. And right now, I think we're teaching about communing with cattle and learning how livestock is compatible for the habitat that's being maintained. And don't forget fire prevention. So we do have active ag on all of our properties. It just may not be farming, but you're absolutely right. We may not have those soils and that water and that climate. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, I think Alan, were you going to say something too?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I just, not much to add there. Tyra and Tracy covered a lot of it. And I think it really does come down to kind of the ownership of the property, right? Whether it be a lease arrangement or outright ownership. That always is essential, obviously, with regards to a land use on any particular parcel. One project of interest is Treasure Island in San Francisco. There are actually plans to build 8,000 new homes out there, which is quite extraordinary. But the 1939 portion of the island, not the Yerba Buena portion, which is real land, the landfill portion from the 1939 is being developed, but a bulk of that is subject to sea level rise. And as a result, they were proposing a large, I think either a 20 or 40 acre market garden out there to support for the residents. And so it was a really interesting idea. And then, there's also these, in the article that was sent and the text, the chat was really great about the CSAs, obviously community supported agriculture programs are great. And then also the idea of like an agri-hood, if anybody's heard about that. I think there's one up in Davis, kind of an interesting concept, but large community garden, market garden product, program inside of a neighborhood and as a focus of the neighborhood, which is really interesting. So those are great projects. And I think, that even the idea of like, cottage industries that spring up out of those, like for instance, the group Slug that I had mentioned, they were actually had a market garden big enough that they were doing fresh cut flowers and also generating salad dressings, their own salad dressings in a community commercial kitchen. And those were products that they were selling, and they were able to employ a lot of the at-risk youth in the neighborhood doing it. So it was really exciting. But that whole circular concept around these things can be very, very exciting. And I really encourage those efforts, obviously. But it really does come down to kind of getting approval and ownership or having some level of buy-in about the parcel itself.
I'll just add to that with an example from far away in Philadelphia, but what the city did there is they partnered with a heavy-hitting nonprofit, the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, and identified vacant lots that could be turned into urban gardens. And the city said, because we're partnering with this big nonprofit, they will take over, because usually the city's concern with gardening on vacant land is liability issues. So if there's a partner that can take over some of those responsibilities, then it changes things a little bit. So that's another model. And I'll also just share that there are multiple cities across California that mention urban farms. So I can just screen share that right now so you can kind of see who they are. So Richmond, unsurprisingly, Richmond has a health in all policies program. So every single policy that the city puts together really they ask themselves, are we addressing health? Are we infusing environmental justice? And they're a real leader in that. So an excellent place to look. National City, also a leader in environmental justice. Unsurprisingly, talks about urban farming. Davis, as you mentioned, has an agri-hood. San Francisco with Slug, talks about urban farming. And then I want to draw your attention to Vacaville down here and switch my sharing a little bit to pull up Vacaville's general plan so that you can see this beast of a document, which is in Solano County. It's over 600 pages long, and it took a long time just to use the control find PDF function, but there is an action item in the land use element that specifically states that the city will identify and inventory potential or community garden and urban farm sites. So there's already a policy on the book. And this is where, if this is something you want to see happen, you just need to get your community members together and show up in city council and say, you said you were going to do this. You will notice with this action, it doesn't have a I mean, there might be another inventory later in the plan that has a timeline, but it doesn't necessarily have, and we will apply for USDA grants, or this is the particular department that's going to take the lead. So as you think about revising your city plans, learn from this example, and think about how to make those policies particularly strong by providing a plan of action for them.
Thank you for sharing that. There were several questions around urban ag that came in, and I think you just maybe covered one of them, which was, could we follow the model of San Francisco where empty lots have to be considered for community garden sites? And so, well, yay, Vacaville, you're already, like you say, it's already there. There was another question about, can growers sell what they grow in an urban ag plot? And we're talking about produce only right now. And are there any restrictions on growing commercially in urban ag spaces? So who wants to take that? Nobody.
I can take it. So there's recently been cottage food laws passed in California, which would cover this. Selling food is really complicated. It depends on whether you're selling it raw, how much you're selling, does it need to be refrigerated? Is it chopped? Is it cooked? Is it a hot dog?
I think right here we're wondering about growing it. Like, let's say I'm the urban farmer and I'm growing my tomatoes and I want to sell my tomatoes. So yeah, I mean, I understand cottage food is like food preparation, but I believe this question is more about selling the produce that I grow in my urban ag plot. So it's not in a rural area.
Right. Yes. There again, I think talking with your county public health official about how that works, whether you're selling it through a roadside stand or through a farmer's market, or selling it directly to a restaurant, is a good way to go. And there again, my lab has built these maps where we look at first point of sale or donation for farms, so that you can check on our website. But if you wanted to consult with others who are doing exactly the same thing, there's a list of other folks who are also selling, so you could talk with them about it.
Allan, did you have something else to mention on that one?
I think, that really hits on kind of county concepts as well. There are roadside stands that, if it's not an urban setting, obviously, but if local farmers wanted to, had an ag piece of property and they had some produce that they're selling raw, largely not really packaged or processed, they can apply for a permit and do such on roads, literally on the roadside. And there's some criteria around it, but it is allowable use on ag pieces, I believe. But yes, there is some level of complication as to, like, honeys, for instance, or olive oils, things that get processed a little bit or packaged tend to be a little higher scrutiny as to how they're, sold. Whereas eggs or, heads of lettuce or something, or tomatoes are a little more easy, I think, to accomplish in that manner.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to move on while we're kind of on the county ag area. Someone was wondering, are there any building restrictions on ag land? For example, is a greenhouse allowed, but not a condo?
I could feel that. Yeah. So for instance, as was discussed, the general plan really kind of lays out the growth and the vision of a community over the 25 to 35 year period, and then zoning comes into play to kind of bring those uses to fruition. And so there are specific land uses and zone districts that allow specific things. For instance, there's residential districts that allow housing, but in Solano County, there's we have agriculture, which is ag zoning is mostly, it's about 62% of the county, which is extraordinary. In between Sacramento and San Francisco, such big urban areas. and on those pieces, we are very particular about the types of uses that are allowed. So for instance, condominiums are a type of house, but it's a high density housing use type that's not allowed basically on ag zone parcels. However, there is, an allowance for the ranchers and their families and to live in agricultural, or live on their ag lands, but in residences. So lower density, single family homes, and we actually allow second homes on most ag pieces as well. But interestingly, you talk about greenhouses. It hasn't. I don't know if it's come up in its entirety yet, but the idea of Gotham Greens is here in our county. Very interesting project. It's in rough numbers, it's about, I think, about a half acre under greenhouse, and they're producing about 6 million heads of lettuce a year out of that facility with what they say is extraordinary 95% less land and 97% less water. So it's highly efficient production of crops indoors. And in Solano County, we just went through a zone text amendment, but it has been determined that a greenhouse equals row crops in Solano County, which is kind of an interesting thing. So you can actually, because there's food production inside of greenhouses as well as in row crops. So it's kind of an interesting new technology, really, it's coming down the pipe. Some people call it ag tech, for instance. So we're paying close attention to that and looking at that. We also have Salad Cosmos here in the county, and a few other facilities that are doing something of similar crop production. And so, yeah, zoning really does dictate what can go on specific parcels, but it's county practice here in Solano County that ag really be used for ag zoning, land be used for ag production.
So that means that a greenhouse could go on viable ag land, which of course could be used to put plants into the ground, because this question has come up at Alliance meetings many times. So what, and your answer is yes, right? So
technically, yes. We have two distinct, land types of ag in the county: prime and non-prime lands.
Okay.
It's although technically allowed, not generally favored to put greenhouses on prime ag land. Non-prime maybe more akin to that. And then we also have an area north of Dixon that's an industrial ag services area that's encompasses about 600 acres, where some of those uses actually could very neatly fit into. And so we're looking at exploring, incentivizing those uses in that area.
Got it. There was another question, this is sort of related as well, about the zoning, and it was, what zoning impacts the placement of hydroponic or aquaponic businesses? And do buildings, well, you just answered that, the next part, do buildings growing food have to be on prime ag land? And just to give everyone a really brief definition, so hydroponics is where you're growing plants using kind of a water-based nutrient solution rather than soil. And then the aquaponics, which is also sometimes called aquaculture, is where you have the cultivation of underwater plants, but then you also have the breeding of fish, and you can sell or utilize both of those things. So I don't know if, Alan, if you want to address, has there been any discussion on hydroponic or aquaponic businesses, or is this something that might fit into that area north of Dixon that you're speaking about?
I think hydroponic is technically how Gotham Greens operates, if I'm not mistaken. And sometimes they're called vertical greenhouses as well. There's a real efficiency with, piping water to the top of a plant system and then letting it gravitate towards the bottom, and it does some very interesting things that way. I'm new to that kind of a technology of food production, if you will. But aquaponics, I think there was, it's rare, is what I would say. I'm well versed kind of in the permaculture concept, And I think that there's a lot of merit to that. I think on small scale, I've heard of these things. I've also heard of a large scale production facility that's, if anybody's familiar with Kathy Wood and kind of the ARC Fund, I think it's called, but she focuses on some of the most high tech kind of technology out there. And there's an aquaponics outfit that's really doing something very differently and being very successful at it. I'm not familiar where it's at, but supposedly she's involved with that somehow. We don't see that in the county, although there's basically good water here in Solano County generally, but we really don't see those come through. And I'm not familiar with any projects that are operating actually doing that.
Okay, let's see here.
Stephanie,
Tracy,
we've got a
yes.
raised hand from the,
Oh,
okay.
yes.
Yeah. So let me-
Berman. I think you'll get unmuted shortly. Stand by.
Hi, thanks. I'm Bob Berman. I live in Benicia. I guess I've been involved in Solano County land use issues for more than 40 years. I got the scores to prove it. But I did want to, I wanted to kind of follow up because I was going to raise the issue about the greenhouses. And then the broader issue of the types of uses that are allowed within ag areas that then compete with the agriculture uses. And I was glad to hear, Stephanie, you say that your group is continuing to look at that question of greenhouses, because I'm not convinced that you couldn't locate a greenhouse within an industrial park within a city. I'm not sure it has to be on prime ag land. And my recollection is that the county zoning ordinance was just recently changed. It does make it easier or permits the use of the greenhouse, locating the greenhouses on prime land. The other issue that is also now being discussed by the Solano Planning Commission is the whole issue of ag tourism. And we see that now, especially going on in Suisun Valley, where there's a push to put, whether it's tasting facilities, whether it's special events, whether it's hotels, people who want to go into, an agriculture area because of the overall ambience of the area. And I understand the need for ag tourism, but what limits do we have to put on it? And is it going to get to the point, and again, just Allan might want to talk to this, the Solano County Planning Commission, I guess, is talking about some of this tonight, but to what extent do you control or limit that ag tourism so it doesn't become a tourist area and the secondary use is simply the ag use, which is used as an ambient area to promote the tourism? Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. I look forward to meeting you in person at some point as well. I think we probably have a lot to talk about. So yeah, thanks for the questions. For instance, many of you may be familiar, but there is a Suisun Valley strategic plan that has been adopted. And it was a very collaborative effort with a lot of the folks in the valley. But it does designate a number of neighborhood agricultural tourist centers. And so there's one at Mancus Corner, there's one on Morrison Lane, there's the Rockville Corner area, Iwama Market. There's one over across on Cordelia Road at Thomason Lane, the Gormer School, and at the Armory Museum as well. But those are, designated, agreed upon and designated areas to encourage ag tourism. And so that was a collaborative effort with, coming up with this strategic plan to identify, limited areas where ag tourism would make sense, where it can be accommodated, where there's attractions, et cetera. And the thought was that these areas would really be a way for Solano County, or at least the Suisun Valley, to really celebrate its produce and products. And so, they're slow to evolve, but they have been coming to fruition in some of these areas. And there is a limited amount of that land use that will be allowed through this strategic plan, Bob. That's kind of there is a cap to it. And so, you know, there's an allotment occasionally for a various area or a project if they're having some level of success and they want to expand, that those areas do have the ability to request that expansion of that zone district, which is the ATC, agritourism centers. And so yeah, it's an interesting balance. Obviously, you don't want to see those everywhere, and all parts of the county don't. You know, it wouldn't do well in all parts of the county because of the nature of the population, the produce and products that are generated. But in the Suisun Valley, obviously, wine is a destination kind of product, and so this is an opportunity. And you know, olive oil production. There's some really interesting stories and businesses in that strategic plan area that I think a number of folks are really looking to you know, share with the world, or at least small parts of the world, and celebrate. You know, and so this is an opportunity through a very collaborative process in which to try to do that through that strategic planning process.
Right, thank you. Winona is kind of raising your hand, and then Tracy, I see that you have a comment. We're working on unmuting you. Hold on.
Well, I asked to unmute and then folks should be able to unmute themselves.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Winona. Can you try now?
I think you're still muted, Winona.
Try this again. All right.
So,
Okay. I've lived in Green Valley for 30 years, and the whole area of Rockville Road, Suisun area, there used to be lots of agriculture. I mean, the trees are gone. You know, it's really doesn't look like an ag tourism area unless they decide something to plant besides grapes. Olives are, you know, I think are a nice alternative, but it really doesn't look like ag land right now unless they can figure out something better. I mean, Glasshop is gone. The Awama market is dead forever. And, you know, there's one farm stand right at the near the roundabout. But, you know, it used to have another market down the way when Susie, whatever her name was now, I can't remember, it was there. But, you know, it doesn't have the ambiance that, you know, and now we have thousands of grape plants planted over on Business Center Drive. But, you know, that's going to be a long time coming before there's any grapes out of it. I'm sorry, it just does not look like it's worth focusing on this if, you know, it's going to not look better in 10 years. Okay, that's my soap opera.
okay. Thank you. Tracy, go ahead.
Thank you. Just so much good information here, and I wanted to wrap around, I think, to a few things that collectively hit on many points. But if I could share a story, I went to Lexington, Kentucky, to an American Farmland Trust conference many years back, and did a tour of a rainbow bread factory downtown Lexington, and it was the city that was promoting understanding their need, and then taking action and making it happen. But it was a hydroponics grower on top doing lettuce with the tilapia. So maybe it was the aquaponics with the tilapia. Take a step back. It was a beautiful old building. You could see the paint chipping, but you could still see that it was a rainbow bread factory. But you go upstairs and you see this aquaculture going on. Then you learn the cafe is taking a portion below, and they're serving the tilapia and the lettuce. And the story continues because then there's a brewery in the other portion downstairs, and they don't serve food, but you can order food from the cafe, and they're actually feeding the fish with the malt and the barley from the brewery. And it was just this great, very centric activity that, you know, if we could just like Dr. Brinkley has shared many other opportunities or models, that's just something that if cities could consider in these spaces where there are old buildings. If we're not thinking about taking these infill opportunities and creating housing, which we'd love to see also, but really kind of reinstating, Tyra talked about, how are we going to feed our local community? And, is this not another way that the city can participate with some sort of, complex, but very suitable activity? So I really enjoyed seeing that. What I wanted to mention is Solano Land Trust partners with its cities. So again, I think the city of Vacaville can speak to this, but through their general plan process, most general plans have a mitigation portion where they have to react to the loss of something. And for the city of Vacaville, many of us along Leisure Town Road have seen agriculture within the city limits, whether you knew it or not, it was within the city limits. And so through their general plan, they've taken that step to make sure that both agriculture and the loss of any habitat is considered. So when that developer comes in and they're moving through the process of developing what we know as the agricultural land, though it's in the city limits, or the potential of land being annexed, that is ag or has a habitat component, the land trust, the city, the developers are all working together because there is a mitigation effort that is required. Typically, agricultural land replaced at a 1-to-1 ratio must be protected through that development. And also, in this case, Thwaites and Hawk or burrowing owl habitat is also protected. And some agency, some group like a land trust needs to hold those conservation easements. So even though the land trust would love to see the prime soils protected and agriculture preserved, we're obviously working in partnership with cities and/or counties if it takes place where the mitigation effort is required. So we would be able to work with those developers to protect really like for like land at typically a 1-to-1 ratio. We'd all love to see maybe a 1-to-2 or a 1-to-1.5 ratio so that we're moving past what's been taken. At the same time, I mentioned the SALT program, the Sustainable Agricultural Lands program. When we talk about prime soil, the state of California is putting the flag out there. The federal government is putting the flag out there and saying, preserving agricultural land, especially our prime soils, those that have good class 1, class 2 soils, that have great drainage, that have good climate and have water accessible, and then the services that support all of that. So if we're not preserving prime soils that are producing our food and in capacity so that we can keep those services like trucking and processing and those farmers engaged, we have to think about that all along the way. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that together, that prime soils are important. And we see that in the city general plans when they're doing mitigation, it's like for like land. And we see the city and the state doing it. And so those opportunities are there to keep that conversation going, and just know that it's important.
So Tracy and also Tyra, regarding the urban ag sites, are there any systems in place that would protect smaller parcels of agricultural land? Like, maybe a community garden or something similar? Where would that fall?
Tyra, go ahead.
That's a really great question. For the most part, the city of Vacaville does not have actively productive agricultural lands. For us, we use our ag zoning designation as an interim zoning designation when we annex land from the county into the city. That allows the existing use to remain in place until such time that the landowner decides to develop. Now, that said, we do have some city-owned land, at least one parcel I'm aware of within the city, where the city has partnered with a local church, and they are currently working on a community garden. So for us, that open space was already protected. When the city buys land for the purpose of public open space, it's public. you can't sell it, you can't develop it. But we did make the concession to allow a third party to create a community garden to serve the low resource area around it.
And would this be taking place in kind of these buffer zones that Allan was talking about? Is it on the
No.
outskirts? No, this is
not for us. For us, we the city, don't want to introduce any new pests or pesticides or anything along those lines that might put the agricultural land in the county at risk.
Okay.
Stephanie, as it relates to the land trust, I think a lot of the Solano Land Trust and many others, we do traditional work. We move through the process that we call this a conservation agreement. We call it a tool that landowners may use. The tool is really based in market value and the value of that restriction. And so when we talk about doing smaller parcel work that really benefits, you know, maybe beginning landowners or small producers and food systems that can really kind of feed right into the local use.
Right.
It's a great question, and it's a tough one because our traditional tool is really relying on creating a value when that restriction happens that we pay the landowner. And if there's nothing to restrict, so in the county, they have ag zoning, the size of the parcel in that area. So it could be agricultural 20, 40, 80, 160. And so a development right is allowable for every parcel designation. So if we're talking about a 5 acre, a 10 acre, a 20 acre parcel, zoned A20, we don't want to restrict the one and only house that can go on that property. That property needs to have resale value. That property needs to be sustainable with somebody that lives on it. So if we're not doing their development right restriction, what are we restricting? Not ag. So there's no value in that one. So it's not there's not an answer that we have to say no, but we don't have that answer we use that traditional tool, and that this is very deep as to how this works, but we do have it at Solano Land Trust in our new ag conservation plan that we're going to research it, because there are land trusts that are doing it. There are kind of nuanced ways to do it. I didn't mention earlier, but we are an accredited land trust through Land Trust Alliance. We're 10 years accredited. And so we do have those standards and practices so that we can provide good service, long-term stewardship, and enforce conservation easements so that the terms are met. Because again, we hold these in public trust. So the ability to enforce them if there is a violation is really based in a restriction of some sort. And so the answer is not easy, but do know that the Land Trust is searching like that standard and practice way, like how can we manage that opportunity to do smaller parcels?
Yeah.
Hello?
Thank you.
I'm still on this call, but
we know. There she goes. All right, let's see here. Well, there's more questions, and I know there's a few. Allison's been sending me a bunch in the chat too. But I want to go to one in particular that came up at a discussion at Soul Food Farm, and this was with Congressman Mike Thompson. And it was with regards to foreign entities buying up farmland. And so we sent the question over to the congressman, and he kind of came back with the answer that at the federal level and at the state level, there really aren't any ordinances or any particular law that would prevent this from happening. So the question now is, can local planning or zoning departments, or activities support or create some kind of ordinance so that a foreign entity cannot buy up farmland or other food producing land?
I can weigh in there perhaps. So here in Solano County, we've got an interesting situation where we've got a mystery buyer in the county.
Yes, that has come up in conversation too.
And we're looking into it. But basically what we've been told is that if somebody is not of US origin and purchasing property, ag land, the USDA does have the ability to research their purchases, and they are actively doing that. And I believe some parts of the county. And so there is a review underway around that. But otherwise, it's a bit of a mystery.
Well, that's good to hear. It's getting researched, because I know many farmers were concerned about this, and I believe that there were purchases kind of all over along some waterways, and yeah, for a long time, nobody's knowing what's going on. So I'm glad to hear that there's some kind of action to at least try to figure it out. All right, I want to go over here to some of the questions that have, I think, come in right now. We only have a few minutes left. And I just want to see if there's any that we haven't really touched on. Let's see. Well, there's one here which I think is probably for a different person. Are there educational programs to ensure owners, workers can learn new skills? I think that would be Center for Land-Based Learning is what comes to mind here. But then another one is, what are ways that residents can influence land use decisions? And I believe that some of you have touched on this already with, steps that you could take. You go to the city council, you find a champion at the city council, and maybe get together a petition or something. Maybe Tyra, do you want to expand a little bit on that?
The best thing local citizens can do to be part of the land use discussion is simply show up. Make your face known. They will get to know you. They will know you by name. You can start with staff. I'll speak for the city of Vacaville. We're very friendly. We love talking to people. If you're just coming in and you're wanting information, we'll do our best to help you understand what's going on. From there, you can elect to either get together with a group, or you can come in yourself, maybe speak to a planning commissioner. Typically, a planning commissioner is a little bit more about land use planning than your council person. So it's never a bad idea to talk to your planning commissioners. And you're always welcome to attend those meetings as well. Ultimately, most land use decisions will go to the city council. So it never hurts to make friends with a couple of council members as well. But simply show up, let people know you're interested. And your planning staff can be a great place to start.
Okay. Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, it's get to know your council person, get to know your planning people, rally your friends and family around the cause, and then circle back. And then to get it from that concept into a reality, that's where the planning commissioners need to figure it out, basically. Is that correct? And maybe come up with that particular rule or regulation, or
honestly, what usually happens is the planning staff will recommend something.
Okay.
So that's another reason it's always good to just speak with your planning staff. We can either tell you, other people who are like-minded, so maybe you guys can get together and create your own group, or we can tell you other professionals that might be able to help out depending on what the proposal is. But anytime, I'll speak for myself, anytime I can stand in front of that planning commission or that city council and say, we have residents or we have interested parties in the audience who support this idea, that helps us greatly.
Okay, thank
Stephanie,
you.
I would just add also, thanks, Tyra, those are great comments about the idea of, when these general plans are updated. Frequently, planners like Tyra and I would reach out to the public to seek technical or citizens advisory committees. So you could be basically working with staff lockstep all the way through the process. That group really serves as a sounding board and reaches out to their community of friends and family and helps us understand the process much better. And so it's a real integral process. And a lot of times there's a lot of opportunities to volunteer as a citizen in these efforts, both planning, zoning updates, general plan updates, and then as Tyra mentioned, at the planning commission itself, and a lot of times for us, the board of supervisors or city council meetings. So, just worth getting on the agenda mailing list so you know what's coming and when you need to be present, et cetera. So I encourage that level of activism. It's really a great opportunity to get engaged with forming, your community, how it actually grows.
Alan did a great job with just the public knowing where you can sign up for information so that you are getting those emails. So whether it's the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors or the City Council, those are all great opportunities. Another one would be is engaging in an agency or a nonprofit or a group that has a voice. And so whether it's the Farm Bureau, Sustainable Solano, the Orderly Growth, the Land Trust, find that group that is doing the work and has the voice that you have. And we always need that support too from the community.
Thank you. All right, we only have about 2 minutes left. Do any Alliance members have any further questions or comments?
Robin posted one to the, okay, Robin, we're going to unmute you so you can ask that one.
Thank you. I just wanted to know the panelists' thoughts about what some next steps might be hearing this discussion. What are some next steps that you think would be the most important steps the Solano Local Food System Alliance could take to preserve ag land and to just help boost up, uplift especially our small to medium farmers? The large ones seem to be doing fairly well, but the small to medium ones, just seem like they need some assistance.
You know what I would ask as a land trust is, we try to get out there and meet as many people as possible. And I think Sustainable Solano has done an excellent job at kind of gathering the who. And so I don't know, a coffee break, a meet and greet, just an opportunity to have to connect, I think would be, the needs are different for everyone. I'm sure that is going to come to this, that has this need, but something different. And so we need to hear those. So I would encourage, I think you guys have done a great job with, who you've touched and reached out to. So maybe a meet and greet would help the Land Trust.
Perhaps building an ask list as well. So pick and prioritize some of the changes you want to see. And then back those up. What other places have done them? What did it cost? How long did it take? Where can you find funding?
Yeah. Who else needs to be at the table?
Yeah, exactly.
All of that. Yeah. Funding piece is always the fun one.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, it is 6 o'clock. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this. This was really, really valuable, I think, and we all learned a lot.